When a woman treats you like an option, she texts you when she's bored, not because she misses you. She remembers you when the one she wants forgets her. You're the one she uses for attention when her ego is low. You're the backup plan she knows will always say yes. She keeps you close enough to use, but far enough to never choose. She'll keep you guessing while chasing someone else without hesitation. And if you ever call it out, she'll say you're overthinking it, but deep down, you feel it. The disrespect, the emotional distance. Now it's time to stop feeling it and start doing something about it. If you're serious about changing your story, comment, "I am the prize." Number one, stop explaining your worth. Every time you try to explain your worth to someone who doesn't see it, you give away a piece of your power. And most men don't even realize it because they've been conditioned to think that love requires performance. That value is proven through sacrifice, that you must keep proving you're worthy of a place in someone's life, even when they keep showing you through actions that you're just a tool they pick up and put down when convenient. And what's worse is that they confuse attention with care. They think long replies mean love, and they believe that explaining their intentions will somehow open her eyes and make her treat him right. But it won't, because respect is never given in response to a monologue. It's given in response to presence. And if you have to constantly tell someone why you matter, you're trying to sell your value to someone who already walked past the shelf. And while you're typing out essays about how you feel, she's texting another option who didn't explain. And he just was. And that's what you need to understand. You are not a speech. You are not a pitch. You are not something that needs to be packaged and presented for approval. And the minute you stop trying to be understood and start focusing on becoming undeniable, you will feel a shift so strong it becomes a lifestyle, not a moment. And you'll notice how people treat you differently, not because they suddenly changed, but because you finally respected yourself enough to stop begging for what should have been offered freely. And if someone only responds when you pressure them emotionally, they never truly saw you. They only feared losing your attention, which isn't the same as valuing your presence. And once you internalize that, once you live with the principle that real presence doesn't chase validation, everything changes, because you stop trying to earn loyalty from someone who isn't even capable of consistency. You stop writing long messages explaining why you're upset. You stop venting your soul to someone who replies with one-word responses. You stop checking if they viewed your story, because you realize you read the story and their presence is the chapter you no longer need. And this is not about being cold or distant. This is about regaining your internal control. Because if someone needs convincing to value you, they're not confused. They're clear, and they're hoping you're not. And the only way you stop this cycle is to stop participating in it entirely. Not by arguing louder, but by living louder. By creating a life so focused on improvement that you have no energy left for those who don't recognize the effort, the pain, the loyalty you bring. Because the truth is, stop explaining your worth. She didn't forget your worth. She just never intended to honor it. She was entertained by your consistency, addicted to your availability. And every time you explained yourself, she got more proof that you'd never leave, more confirmation that you didn't believe you could walk away. And that's what kept her comfortable. Not your love, but your weakness. And if you're honest with yourself, you knew it, you felt it, but you chose hope over evidence. And now you're left confused, but confusion doesn't need closure, it needs clarity, and clarity begins with this. You are no longer available for people who require explanations to see your worth. You are no longer lowering your voice, hoping to be heard by someone who chooses not to listen. You are no longer rehearsing pain in your mind to understand why they treated you like a backup. You are deleting the script, walking off the stage, and building a reality where your presence speaks for itself. Not in arrogance, but in quiet certainty. The kind that doesn't demand attention, but commands it. The kind that doesn't need to shout because the results do the talking. The kind that isn't trying to win her over because there's nothing left to win. And the moment you fully stop explaining, she'll feel it. Not because you said anything, but because the silence became too loud to ignore. And by the time she wonders what happened to the man who used to pour out his soul, you've already become the man who no longer needs to. Not because you have changed who you are, but because you finally remembered what you've always been: enough, valuable, worthy, without needing permission or approval. And now it's her turn to explain what she lost. But you won't be listening anymore. And if you're ready to stop explaining and start evolving, the Stoic Relationship Blueprint was written for you. A deep, timeless guide packed with the principles you were never taught but always needed. It's more than a book. It's a mindset reset, a path to clarity, power, and emotional control. And now it's available as an audiobook too, so you can start transforming your life while walking, running, even driving. No distractions, no more delays. You'll own it forever with lifetime access to the knowledge that makes you untouchable to the games you once fell for. The link is in the comments. Number 2, set boundaries and stick to them. Most people say they have boundaries, but what they really have are suggestions, temporary limits. They abandon the moment someone attractive disrespects them, and that's the reason so many are treated like options, because their boundaries don't exist when it counts the most. And what's worse is that the moment someone shows interest, they lower the bar just to feel wanted, and they confuse being wanted with being valued. But the truth is, the more you bend your boundaries to accommodate someone else's chaos, the more you lose your identity, and you begin to tolerate behaviors you swore you'd never accept, like being talked down to, ghosted, disrespected in public, made to wait hours for a response, treated like a spare part instead of a priority. And you keep saying to yourself just this once, thinking they'll see your patience as strength, but all they see is that you don't take yourself seriously. And the moment they sense you won't enforce your limits, they start testing you like a game. They know they can keep playing without consequence. And that's not because they're evil. It's because you gave them permission to try. And every time they disrespect you and you stay, you reinforce the idea that their behavior is acceptable. And this is where most people get it wrong. They set boundaries and enforce them. Think setting boundaries means being angry, shouting, demanding change, but boundaries are not about raising your voice. They're about raising your standards and sticking to them without warning, because a boundary you have to beg someone to respect is a fantasy, not a standard. And here's the truth. If they cross the line once and you allow it, they'll cross it again. But this time, they won't apologize because you already taught them that apologies are optional and presence is guaranteed. And the deeper truth is that you're afraid of enforcing your boundaries, not because you're weak, but because you fear the outcome of losing them. You think that if you stand firm, they'll walk away. And yes, they might. But what's worse than someone leaving after you draw the line is someone staying and dragging you further into disrespect every day while you tell yourself it's getting better. And if you're being honest, you've seen the signs. You've felt the dismissiveness, the eye rolls, the coldness in their tone, the way they flirt with others in front of you, the way they act single when you're not around, the way they treat your affection like a nuisance instead of a gift. And still you hold on, not because it's love, but because you're scared to start over, and because a part of you believes this is the best it gets. And that's the part that must die for the real you to live, the version of you that no longer tolerates emotional crumbs and believes that love doesn't require the constant sacrifice of self-respect. And to become that version, you have to stick to your boundaries like they are laws, not preferences. And that means when someone disrespects your time, you remove your time. When someone mocks your needs, you remove your presence. When someone gives you half effort, you don't ask for more. You give less access. Not because you're playing games, but because the value of your energy is not up for debate. And that's the truth no one wants to hear. That you teach people how to treat you by what you tolerate, not by what you say. And if your actions don't match your words mean nothing. And if you say, I won't tolerate disrespect, but still answer calls from people who disrespected you last week, then your standard is fake and people will treat you accordingly because the ones who truly value you won't Eve and come close to testing your boundaries. They'll recognize them and rise to meet them, but the ones who don't, they'll push, they'll manipulate, they'll guilt trip, they'll pretend to change until they're comfortable again, and then they'll go back to who they always were. And that's where your boundary must become a door, one they walk through once and don't get a second chance if they slam it behind them. And yes, it will be hard at first. You'll doubt yourself. You'll want to explain why you're pulling back. But you don't owe anyone an explanation for protecting your peace. You don't need to justify your standards to someone who keeps proving they don't meet them. And the moment you stop negotiating with people who test your limits, you'll feel something strange, peace. Not because life is perfect, but because the wrong people no longer have access to interrupt it. And that peace, it becomes addictive, it becomes your new baseline, and you'll start to see every message, every invitation, every request, not as a compliment, but as an access request. And unless their behavior aligns with your boundaries, the way answer is no. Without guilt, without seconding, without thinking, maybe you're being too harsh because you're not. You're just finally being honest about what you deserve. And if that honesty cost you people, they were never assets in the first place. And every time you enforce a boundary and lose someone, you don't lose, you gain clarity. And in that clarity, you'll build a life where you no longer fear being alone because you know being surrounded by people who make you feel invisible is far worse than solitude. And that's the switch, the shift, the reset, when you finally understand that boundaries are not about keeping others out, they're about keeping yourself intact. And the moment you honor them without hesitation, you stop being an option and start becoming a standard. Number 3, focus on your goals. Every second you spend thinking about someone who's treating you like a backup is a second you steal from the life you could have built. And what most people don't realize is that distraction is the most dangerous poison. Not because it kills you instantly, but because it slowly erodes the drive inside you. It turns your mind into a screen where her name keeps playing on loop and you start checking your phone instead of checking your progress. And what makes it worse is you don't even notice it happening. You think it's just a phase, a rough week, a temporary heartbreak, but it's not temporary if it becomes your default. And when your focus shifts from your mission to her attention, you've already lost, not because she took your power, but because you gave it away voluntarily. And this is where the truth hits hardest. She doesn't care if you're distracted. She doesn't care if your dreams fall apart while you wait for her to reply. Because to her, your silence means nothing if she's still entertained elsewhere. And the only way you rise, focus on your goals, not her attention from this trap, is by cutting off everything that keeps you in the loop of waiting, wondering, hoping, and instead build a system around your time, energy, and mind that leaves no space for emotional parasites. And yes, that means being ruthless with your priorities, because if your goals don't become your obsession, your pain will. And you know this already. You felt it. The way your productivity crashes when she ignores you. The way your sleep breaks when you imagine her with someone else. The way you say you're fine, but can't even focus for 10 minutes without drifting back into old conversations in your mind. And if that's where you are, the solution isn't more motivation. It's structure, discipline, design, and focus. And it starts with this. Set a deadline. CK one target that would change your life if you hit it. Whether it's money, health, skills, or freedom, and go a line, not halfway. Not when you feel like it, not when she's acting right, but now even in the pain, even in the heartbreak, because the truth is your goals don't care if you're hurting. They only respond to action. And the longer you let distraction hold you back, the harder it becomes to remember who you used to be before she became your center and that version of you. He didn't wake up checking messages. He didn't delay work because of emotion. He was focused, locked in, silent, building, and it's time you return to him. Not by forcing it, but by designing your life so powerfully that you don't have time to sink into overthinking. And that means waking up early, training hard, eliminating digital noise, feeding your mind with direction, and being so locked into your journey that even when she tries to crawl back into your mind, you don't even notice because your reality has outgrown your past. And this isn't about being heartless, it's about being aligned with your future. And once you experience that alignment, once your days are filled with progress and momentum, you'll start seeing everything differently. The games, the tests, the manipulation, and they won't affect you, not because you're numb, but because you've elevated. And elevation changes perspective. So stop asking if she sees your worth and start becoming the person whose success makes that question irrelevant. And yes, there will be moments where you'll feel like reaching out, like checking her page, like replying to that message. But in those moments, remind yourself what's at stake. Not just pride, but potential. Because every time you chase temporary comfort, you sacrifice long-term power. And one of the most painful truths is this: the people who distracted you during your struggle will never clap when you succeed. So don't wait for their support. Own respect by showing up every day, whether they notice or not. And the more you show up, the less you care who doesn't, because confidence isn't built by being liked. It's built by being consistent. And if your identity is still tied to whether or not she texts back, you're giving someone else the pen to write your story. And it's time to take it back, not just to feel better, but to build better, to rebuild the man who's too focused to chase, too busy to beg, too grounded to fall into emotional traps. And that version of you, he's already inside. You just need to shut out the noise long enough to hear him. And that silence begins when you stop needing approval and start needing achievement. When you stop needing her and start needing purpose. When you stop explaining how hurt you are and start proving how powerful you can be after pain. And from this moment forward, you choose goals over games, peace over patterns, clarity over confusion, and you don't ask permission to rise. You just rise one step at a time until the life you're building is so powerful it speaks louder than any explanation ever could. Number 4, choose growth over closure. Closure is the trap that keeps you checking your phone long after the disrespect ended. It's the lie you repeat to yourself when you're scared to face the truth. It's the excuse you use to stay emotionally attached to someone who already replaced you. And you don't even notice it at first because it wears the costume of logic. You tell yourself, you just need to understand, just need to hear her say sorry, just need that one final conversation to make peace. But what you're really doing is giving your power away to someone who already showed you who they are. And here's the hard truth. People don't forget how to treat you. They treat you the way they want to. And when someone consistently treats you like an afterthought, like a placeholder, like a temporary fix for their boredom, you don't need more words. You need distance. And growth begins the moment you realize that the apology will never heal what their behavior destroyed, that the reasons they give won't undo the nights you waited, the texts they ignored, the effort you wasted trying to fix something they broke without remorse. And it hurts, I know, because part of you believe that if they could just explain, it would all make sense. But betrayal doesn't need explanation. It needs elevation. And elevation starts when you stop chasing clarity from people who made your life confusing on purpose. Because someone who lies to your face, hides their phone, gives you mixed signals, then blames you for overreacting is not confused. They're calculated. And when you keep opening choose growth over closure that door, waiting for a better answer, you keep stepping into the same pain that already proved it doesn't change. And this is where most people stay stuck, trapped in analysis, dissecting every word, every text, every silence, hoping that if they just figure it out, they'll finally get peace. But peace doesn't come from decoding her decisions. It comes from making your own. And the only decision that leads to freedom is choosing growth over closure, because growth is forward and closure is a loop. And every time you wait for closure, what you're really doing is hoping she'll validate the pain she caused. But people who cause pain without care do not offer healing, they offer more delay. And you don't need that. What you need is to break the pattern by becoming unavailable to the person who made you question your value in the first place. And that starts by stopping the chase, not just physically, but mentally, emotionally, spiritually. Stop replaying the memories. Stop fantasizing about her realizing your worth. Stop imagining scenarios where she changes and begs to come back, because that's not healing. That's hope dressed in fantasy, and it's killing your progress. And you know it because while you're stuck in the loop of closure, she's out there living, posting, laughing, moving on like you never mattered. And that's the wake-up call. Not to become bitter, but to become better, sharper, focused, untouchable. Not because you're pretending it didn't hurt, but because you've decided the pain is now your fuel, not your anchor. And when you fully commit to growth, you begin to see everything differently. You stop blaming yourself, you stop chasing conversations, you stop needing anything from someone who had everything and still chose to act like you were disposable, and you start rebuilding yourself piece by piece, habit by habit, day by day, without shortcuts, without waiting for her to notice. Because real growth is silent, it's done when no one claps, and it's the kind that turns you into someone who no longer fits in the version of life where she was the center. And if you really want to move forward, start by writing down the lessons. What did this teach you about your standards, your emotional discipline, your time management, your self-respect? Because there's power in reflection, but there's weakness in obsession. And if you're still stalking her socials, still reading old messages, still fantasizing about the day she texts, "I miss you," then you haven't chosen growth. You've chosen stagnation, and you need to stop. Not for her, but for you, because the man you're meant to become is waiting behind the pain you keep recycling, and you don't get to meet him until you let go of the version of you that needed her love to feel complete. And no matter how good the memories were, they do not justify staying stuck in a situation that broke your spirit, because memories are real, but they are not more important than reality. And if reality shows you that she didn't value consistency, loyalty, effort, or honesty, then it's time to walk forward without looking back. Not because it's easy, but because it's necessary. And the next time you feel tempted to ask for closure, remind yourself the door is closed, not because you weren't enough, but because they couldn't handle the level of love you brought and they disrespected it. So now your only job is to never let that level of disrespect get access again. And when you live like that, grounded, focused, clear, you don't just heal, you evolve. And the version of you that comes out on the other side. He doesn't need closure because his life speaks louder than any text ever could. Number 5, walk away without drama. There is nothing more powerful than walking away without explaining yourself, without seeking approval, without making a scene, just leaving silently with all your dignity intact and your focus redirected toward the life you should have been building from the beginning. Because most people mistake walking away for weakness, when in truth it's the clearest statement of self-worth you could ever make. And the reason it's so hard is because ego wants to win the argument. Your pride wants the last word. Your hurt wants to be acknowledged. But none of that heals you. None of that makes them respect you. It only gives them more power over you, because now you've shown that they still have the ability to trigger you, to shake you, to keep you emotionally bound to a version of yourself that should have been buried the moment they chose to disrespect your presence. And what hurts the most is that they don't feel bad, not in the way you think they should, because people who truly care about you don't put themselves in positions where they might lose you. And if she was ever serious about you, she would have shown it with actions, not with recycled words and temporary affection that only showed up when it benefited her. And you know this deep down. You've seen the patterns, the inconsistency, the disappearing acts when she's bored of you, and the sudden walk away without drama, sweet messages when things fall apart with someone else. And yet you stay hoping it's just a phase, hoping she'll change. And that hope, it's killing your growth. It's distracting you from becoming the person who doesn't wait for closure, who doesn't explain his worth, who doesn't tolerate disrespect even in small doses. And the truth is, when you walk away quietly without bitterness, without begging, without waiting for her to come to her senses, you break a cycle. not just with her, but with every version of you that was addicted to being chosen. And that kind of walk isn't easy. It requires emotional control, discipline, strength. Most people never develop because they're too busy performing their pain instead of processing it. But you don't need to perform, you need to evolve. And evolution begins when you decide that her confusion, her disrespect, her lack of effort, her breadcrumbing, her fake apologies, her cold detachment, none of that deserves your energy anymore. Not because you hate her, but because you finally love yourself enough to stop offering loyalty to someone who treated it like an option. And that's what walking away truly means. Not ghosting, not punishing, but protecting, removing your time from places where it gets wasted, and your peace from people who don't value it. And don't be surprised when she tries to come back, not because she realized your worth, but because she noticed you pulled away completely. And people only feel loss when access disappears, not when love does. And by then, you've already moved different, talk different, walk different, built different, because the version of you that once tolerated being treated like a backup no longer exists. And if you do ever cross paths again, let her meet the man who no longer breaks his standards just to feel accepted, who no longer explains his value to people committed to misunderstanding it, who no longer replies out of habit, but responds only to peace, purpose, and progress. Because when you get to that level, you don't need to block her to prove a point. You just never look back because there's nothing to return to. And silence becomes your confirmation, your revenge, your transformation, because silence is not about ignoring her. It's about answering to yourself first. And from now on, every time someone shows you their priorities and you're not on the list, you exit the conversation without warning. Every time someone plays with your time, you take it back without guilt. Every time someone chooses comfort over commitment, you choose freedom over fantasy. Because nothing destroys your future faster than staying emotionally loyal to someone who already checked out. And nothing rebuilds your identity faster than detaching without apology. And yes, it hurts, especially when you still care, especially when you gave everything. But that pain, it sharpens you. And you'll carry it for a while, but eventually it becomes clarity. And that clarity builds habits, and those habits build the final message and call to action version of you that doesn't beg for closure, that doesn't chase explanations, that doesn't replay old arguments in the shower, hoping to win them this time. Instead, you get to a point where even if she came back with perfect words, it would be too late. Not because you're being petty, but because you finally became whole without her approval. And that wholeness is the ultimate goal. Not winning her back, not proving a point, but creating a life so rooted in discipline, purpose, and inner respect that no situation, no heartbreak, no rejection ever pulls you back into being the man who used to beg for someone to treat him right. Because now you don't ask. You walk and you walk not out of anger, but out of alignment. Because if your presence doesn't inspire effort, your absence will teach the lesson. And by then you won't even be watching. If you're tired of being told to be patient while getting disrespected, if you're done being emotionally drained, second-guessed, and treated like a placeholder, then the stoic relationship blueprint is your next step. Not for her, but for you. This isn't just a book, it's the manual you were never given, packed with timeless stoic principles that will flip everything you thought you knew about relationships, power, and peace. It's now available as an audiobook too, so you can start transforming your mind while walking, jogging, or just reclaiming your time. Society never wanted you to have this kind of clarity because once you have it, you stop being controlled. This isn't for the weak, it's for the man who's ready to stop chasing and start choosing himself. The link's in the comments. Own it once, keep it forever. If you're ready, comment, I choose peace. Hit the like button and subscribe, not just to support this channel, but to help another man out there find this truth before he wastes years chasing what was never